Good morning and welcome to Sunday Square Off on this Easter Sunday. I'm Bram Resnick. Why are state lawmakers instructing teachers on how to use pronouns? Those bills are at the top of the Republican agenda. Last week, one lawmaker spoke out in the most personal terms about the impact of those bills. Right now, we'll hear from Democratic Representative Lorena Austin. Also on today's show, can an indicted Donald Trump win the Arizona presidential primary? Why are Democrats racing to run for 2 congressional seats here in the Valley? And is Carrie Lake running for something? The answer is yes.
I am an expert on this topic. It has been my lived experience since I was 5 years old. And that's when I knew. And so I have to tell you that I cannot imagine being 14 again and having a bill like this come through. Because I grew up in a community where I knew I would not be accepted. I knew I would not be supported in my home or in public. I need you to hear that.
A powerful statement by first-term Democratic Representative Lorena Austin of Mesa explaining their no vote last week on a so-called pronoun bill. Teachers would not be allowed to use a student's preferred pronouns or name without parental permission. Even with permission, school employees could refuse to use the chosen name or pronouns because of religious or moral convictions. Joining us now, Democratic State Representative Lorena Austin. Welcome to Sunday Square Off.
Thank you so much for having me.
You know, I want to be candid with you and our audience. For me and many people watching, there are plenty of teachable moments today in this interview. I hope we can explain, better understand you, better understand this moment we're in.
Yeah,
sound good?
Absolutely.
So you told your Republican and Democratic colleagues last week at the hearing about your identity.
Sure.
Tell us about that.
Yeah, it was something that I really didn't know what I was going to say. I knew obviously this bill was going to come before us, but after hearing the testimony and kind of the intentions behind this bill, even the unintended consequences of it, I just felt it was very important to speak my mind. And obviously I was taking notes, but it was 10 minutes before that, you know, I was watching it happen in front of me. And when I, heard things like, parents need to know because they need to get their children psychological help, it just assumed to me that something was wrong with them. And it really just transported me back into time 20 years ago when I was 14. And I really meant that. If something like this had come out, it just would have furthered, to me, this assumption that something was wrong with me. And I didn't want young people here in Arizona to feel that way, because it's an awful feeling. And it's something that you have to work through and kind of decide, for yourself when it's appropriate for you to come to terms with that.
And how do you identify?
So I identify as non-binary, gender non-conforming, and so for me, that means I don't really fit into these boxes, of gender, that we have in our society, either male or female. Obviously people will notice I probably dress more masculine presenting, but that's just how I feel comfortable. And it's something that I've had to grow into as well, because I think growing up too, like I say, especially 20 years ago, things were very different. And so now I'm seeing, people that actually look like me in the media, it's more common. And so it's taken a long time for me to get here, but I'm really proud to be here and finally live authentically.
So do you identify as transgender, or is that not?
I don't, because to identify as transgender means that you do identify as either male or female. And so for me, it's kind of in the non-binary space. Which means I don't really fit into, these boxes of male or female. I don't know if you notice that my nails are painted. It's just something I like to do. So it's just something that I feel comfortable with presenting, and that's, how I kind of perceive myself.
You said in that soundbite we put up, it has been my lived experience since I was 5 years old, and that's when I knew.
Yeah.
What did you know when you were 5?
I think when I was 5 is when I kind of recognized that maybe I saw thought a little differently about heteronormative relationships, that I was, maybe attracted to women. And so it wasn't at that time that I knew exactly what that meant either, right? It's not at 5 years old. You
wouldn't know what heteronormative.
Right, exactly, right. Now I do. But it wouldn't have been until, I was coming of age in junior high and high school that I thought, okay, this is, not something that's going to be accepted, especially in the 2000s.
And I do want to give folks just a better idea of who you are.
Sure.
You're more than your identity.
Thank
you have
you.
deep roots
Yes.
in Arizona,
I do.
family in Mesa.
Yes. So yeah, my family on my father's side has been in Arizona since the 1860s. So even before
Pioneers.
Yeah, exactly, in Pinal County. So I had a grandfather come from all the way from Cattaraugus, New York, landed here, and he married my great mother, who was Yaqui Indian and Mexican of Mexican heritage, and we've been here for a long time. And then in the 1920s, my family moved to Mesa. So we've been in my district for over 100 years, which is part of the reason why I decided to run when this new district was created. So deep roots. My Nanantata, raised my father and their family in the segregated neighborhood of Mesa at the time, the Washington Escobedo Park. They had a grocery store there. They serviced everyone in their communities, and that type of service and community activism, translated to my father. He's a civil rights attorney, and translated to me. So it's a long lineage there.
I want to turn back to the Bills.
Sure.
And you. And I wonder, what is it like coming to work each day knowing that your Republican colleagues all support this kind of legislation? And I'm not saying all do,
Sure.
but many might just reject who you are. Many others just might not understand.
Sure.
How does that feel showing up in that workplace environment?
Sure. I mean, it could be disheartening when you think about it, but for me, my job is to go in there and represent, my community and my constituents. And I think, it wasn't my intention to be the first, gender nonconforming, non-binary legislator. That was never my intention, because like you said, that's just one part of me. It's not the whole part of me. But I hope that my presence there provides that familiarity, with maybe people that have never really interacted with someone from our community, being the first person there. It kind of forces you to do that. So I'm really trying to set an example and show that, someone from our community just wants the same things, as a lot of other people. And so I haven't had a specific negative reaction or an interaction that made me feel super uncomfortable, but I think knowing that about myself, that I am the first person and I do maybe not fit the norm of that space and place, it comes to my attention. I have that awareness about me, and so I navigate the halls and know that some people might think that, but like I said, I'm always open to having these conversations, and I just hope by me being there provides some clarity and understanding.
You did say that last week.
Yeah.
That you offered. You said, "Hey, come stop by my office. Let's talk."
Absolutely.
Has anybody taken you up on that?
They have not.
They have not. Okay. Okay. I want to put up a soundbite from one of the Republican representatives who who supports the legislation, and it reflects what we heard from other lawmakers at that hearing.
I just can't get to the point where I'm willing to allow government employees to have additional information on a child. The children belong to the parents. The children are legally in the custody of the parents. Parents have rights.
Parents have rights. I do want to point out, when he's talking about government employees, that has become the way Republicans describe school employees. So that's what he's referring to there. He's also LGBT, identifies as part of the LGBT community. But getting back to the parents, what would you say to those parents and even people who aren't parents, who don't have kids in school?
Absolutely. I think that puts it in such a black and white narrative, and it's really not. It's more of a gray area, because I think each person's experience is so individual, right? And it's based on so many other factors, maybe where you live, maybe the community that you come from. And so it's just not as easy to potentially put a student in that very critical situation. Like for myself, when I was growing up, I had the wherewithal to know that wasn't gonna be the best avenue for me. And I didn't choose to come out until I was in my 20s, and I was an adult. So I was able to, maybe have just that, to take ownership of my story. And so I think not every, situation is the same. And it's interesting the feedback I've heard from other teachers who have kind of had this situation, and parents. So on the flip side, I've had teachers and parents, reach out to me and say, well, I wanted to make sure, I went to the school to make sure my child was going to be safe there. So it's not all the times that parents don't know. A lot of times they do, and they want to be supportive, but we have to understand that there are some situations where that's just not the reality. And sometimes too, you could say the reverse, that maybe a child doesn't feel safe in school. So my intention with all of this is that every child should have a safe space no matter where they are in the state.
And I have to give a spoiler alert. Governor Katie Hobbs has already said she will, quote, swiftly veto this bill. So it's not going anywhere, but it does allow for this kind of conversation. I'll end on this. What advice would Representative Lorena Austin give to 14-year-old Lorena Austin about how her life would unfold?
That it gets better. You know, I think anytime I felt this desperation or thought I could never be authentically myself, I am so, proud to be here, and I meant that I could be here and share my story. And it's just disheartening to see that. I think socially we've come so far in the past 20 years. And so to me, it is disheartening to see these types of bills taking us backwards. And so I would, tell my 14-year-old self that, it'll get better, and there will be a community to support you. And I'm so happy to say that, I've come a long way with everyone in my circle, my family, my friends, and it's been such a beautiful experience. But it was my experience, and I got to have autonomy over that.
Representative Lorena Austin, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.